their house. And my father was one of the sons of Jack, and the family is rooted in this area, and the times that they were with this church family have had a great impact overseas. I wanted to come here, and for those of you who might know a little bit or don't know anything, I'll try to explain what has transpired as a result of what this little church did for my dad and for the family.
Was your dad a survivor of the fire?
Yes, he was. He was here, and I'll try to give what I know. When he was about 16 years old, he and 3 other boys made a quartet and sang around, I guess, around the area. And then my dad went to Walla Walla College and pursued a ministerial degree. He didn't graduate because they called him to the ministry before he even graduated, and went back to Maryland, on the eastern shore of Maryland, and did evangelistic work there and established a couple of churches in that area. And then was called by the General Conference to go over to India. And this was in 1945, right after the war. And he was on a boatload of missionaries going to India and other places around the area, in Burma and what is now Pakistan and Nepal and so forth. So they were, you didn't fly in those days, it was all by ship. So they were on a merchant ship, went to India and arrived there, and it's hard to explain how in another culture things are so different, and just getting your feet on the ground and learning the language and customs and where things are. But my dad ended up in Bombay, which is now called Mumbai, which is the commercial center of India, and established a church there. There had been a few Adventists that were there, but had not really been well organized or able to be in a congregation because of the war. Just an interesting sideline is in Burma, there had been a number of German Adventists, and they became prisoners of war because they were on the losing side of the war. And so shortly after we were in Bombay, these German Adventists came through and we hosted them. I don't remember all this is my story from my dad, but we hosted them. And one of those people was Siegfried Horn. I don't know if you recognize that name, who was a great archaeologist and did a lot of great things. That's just a sideline, but it's very difficult to preach to people that don't have the same understanding that we have. It's a lot easier for us to talk to other Christians, even if they're in another denomination. So the problem was how to reach the people in their language, in their culture, and to help them to make a transition into the Christian lifestyle that we believe is so important. But my dad was an evangelist, and so he went from one town to another about every year or two that we were in India, and had big public meetings. He'd go to a park somewhere and or rent a theater or someplace that was amenable to having a large group of people, and then publicized it all throughout the community, and would have usually quite a large people who would come, mostly out of curiosity, because they kind of like a circus coming to town. You know, you have a tent up, you want to see what's going on. My role at that time was to do the projector for the screen that he had all his slides on.
How old were you at this point?
So I've been through a number of evangelistic campaigns. I could probably tell you all the prophecies and the scriptures and everything, just out of having gone over it and over it again. My mother was very talented, and she played the piano. She taught herself to play the piano, and she did artwork. So she would have a big screen, or I can't think of the name, a palette anyway, that she would draw on, and then had colored lights underneath, and turn out the lights, and it would all show, and was quite famous for that, and popular. And then she would give that picture out at the end of one of the sermons, and she'd have people standing in line wanting to get her pictures. So it was by music and being sort of bold to have meetings. We went to one town in Nagpur where they didn't have any place that we could hold the meetings, and we needed a tent. So my mother, on a little Singer sewing machine, sewed a tent that would seat 500 people.
Oh my word.
The whole thing. Can you imagine on those little sewing machines where you have the pedal and trying to get that canvas through there? She had people holding the canvas. I remember that. It was quite an experience.
How
So,
old were you when this happened?
well, I was born in 1943, so I was probably 6 or 7 when that tent was made. We left India in 1956, but we were in Nagpur, and the ones I remember most at the end was in Vishakhapatnam, which is on the coast of India, and very prosperous now. They do a lot of international trade, and Hyderabad and Secunderabad. So I wanted to go back and see what had happened. So in March of this year, I went back with my 4 sons. Now out of my 4 sons, I have 2 of them that are doctors that graduated out of Loma Linda, and 2 of them that are in, I guess you'd call it AI now, medical applications for AI. So they're really smart kids and all doing well. So I got them all to get their schedule together so we could go, and I wanted them to see what their grandfather had done and kind of get a family history. So we went to India and retraced some of the places that we've been. Now, my mother was a teacher, so when my dad was preaching and starting a church, she was starting a school. So we've gone back, and I can tell you from then it was very difficult. And in the churches, you might have 20 or 30 or 40 people that would be baptized out of a crusade. Now, missionaries can't go to India. They won't give you a visa to go in. So it's dependent on the people who were there at the time when my dad was there that are carrying on the work. So we went to Hyderabad, and for instance, they had a church now that has 300 people, and they have 15 satellite churches, home churches, that they're anywhere from 5 to 15, 20 people in those churches out there. My dad had purchased property at the time, which was very difficult. People in the General Conference didn't want to spend the money, and the local people, it was hard to get them to give up property. But they got property in Hyderabad now that's in the central part of the city, and the mission headquarters for the south of India are on that property.
Wow, wonderful.
An interesting sideline is that the local government wanted to take over that property. What we would say here is eminent domain. They wanted to do that. So they figured out a way in the law that says if it is property that has been passed down and has not had a break in public service, they could keep. So the church there now has dedicated the property to my dad's name.
Oh,
So if you go to the church, it says, the Dan Harris Memorial Seventh-day Adventist Church, and now they can keep their property. And they have a school there and church building, the church headquarters. We went to Vishakhapatnam, the city on the coast. You might want to look this up on the map, but it's a beautiful town, and a lot of the companies that are dealing with computers and so forth are having their headquarters or manufacturing there. We went there and got there in the evening, and they had a youth Bible study, and there was about 15 or 20 youth that were sitting out in the courtyard. They have a church building that, while my dad was there, but they've gotten the property around there, and they have a school, and they have a residence for teachers and pastor. Because it's so large, it's hard to get people together. But in that church, they have about 500 people and 30 churches that are in that town that are what they call home churches with 10, 15, 20 people in them. So those are the kinds of things. Now the school part of it, the school, my mom, and I was homeschooled through my mom, they had maybe 10, 15 children, and the word got out that they could get English instruction, which is really important for them. And so those have grown now. So the schools, the one in Calcutta has 1,300 students, and the one in Hyderabad has 1,800 students, and the one in Vishakhapatnam, they have 2 schools, and together they have 4,000 students. And most of the students are from the community, and they get a lot of support from the Muslim community and the Hindu community because they teach English. And they have a waiting list of people that want to come. And they can't teach Bible as a subject, but they call it ethics.
Or history. They teach
Ethics and history. So they can still tell them, and they can read from the Bible, and they can do those things, but it's not a Bible class. But they're making a lot of inroads, and they're getting a lot of, I should say, encouragement from the General Conference, because those are the places that have kind of blossomed. I just want to tell you, a little church like this has a great influence. You probably will never see any of the people that have benefited from that. But I know that you had church schools and you had families, and because of that, the gospel is growing there. When we left India, there was 23,000 Adventists. Today, there's nearly 1 million in India.
Wow. 1 million
Praise the
Adventists?
Lord.
And
Yes.
That's more than our whole North
Praise the
America.
Lord.
That's right. It's pretty close.
Yeah.
And it's in the little villages, and they don't have all the resources that we have here. But if you look at your quarterly from last quarter, it was going to India.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you can see the dormitories, the schools and so on. So I just want you to know that your offerings, your prayers, and support has more meaning, not just what you do, but for everybody.
Amen.
That's it.
Thank you.